Great to be back now with Massachusetts State Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr as we approach the end of summer. Senator Tarr, it goes fast.
It's hard to believe, Rick, that we're approaching the end of summer. But I would say, while Labor Day usually marks the unofficial, as they say, end of summer, we know that we can have some awfully warm days in September and sometimes even into October. So I'm going to say that we still have some time left to go here.
Yeah, I know it's been a bit of a disappointment for Mariners, especially on vacation. But you're right, we got more time left. And I want to ask you before we get started officially here, the Gloucester 400 is rolling along, and recently they had the fisheries thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and then a Coast Guard things. And for those who don't know, visiting Gloucester this particular time, there's a lot of extra stuff going on, and I'm sure you are aware of some of these things, or am I making you aware of them?
No, actually, there's been an incredible cadence of events over the last few months, Rick, as a result of the hard work of the Gloucester 400 Committee. And I've actually had the pleasure of participating in a number of them. I did speak at the ceremony that was held at Coast Guard Station Gloucester to honor and thank the personnel at that station and all of their predecessors. Had the opportunity to participate in Fisheries Heritage Day at the Jodrey State Fish Pier in a little bit of a different role there, Rick. They actually needed someone to operate the golf cart that was ferrying people from parking to the actual event. So I pitched in and did that. Was an introducer of the play that was done at Harriet Webster Pier at Maritime Gloucester by the Annisquam Village Players. And there have been other events that I participated in as well. And Rick, the interesting thing about Gloucester is that there are so many dimensions to be highlighted and to be emphasized and to be celebrated. And this committee is really working hard to make sure that we capture as many of them as possible.
One of the things, just as a discussion here, that we didn't plan for, but I know that you're aware of so many of the great historic figures who have come from Gloucester, and also in your generation, since I was a teacher, many leaders in every different aspect of life have come from Gloucester. So there is a tremendous heritage here besides just the fishing industry and the arts, the world of the arts. And I think people have a chance to visit Gloucester to learn about this stuff.
Well, there's no doubt about it, Rick. And what I like to say is that Gloucester has an incredible reality of daily life, and that reality has attracted poets and painters and folks from throughout the range of the arts. And in fact, right now, Cape Ann Museum has an exhibit going on of the Hoppers, husband and wife, who were both artists, and that illustrates that as well. And Rick, one of the other things that Gloucester 400 has done, and I got to participate in this, was a day to commemorate the legacy of Howard Blackburn. And I know that you're familiar with that legacy, and I believe that's a story that should be taught to every school child in America. And we had a day of readings from the book Lone Voyager that was done by our friend Joe Garland before his passing. And that was another special element of the Gloucester 400 celebration. But you're right, Gloucester has produced a lot of folks. And I heard someone say at one of the Gloucester 400 events that we as Gloucesterites are not known for our shyness with regard to our opinions and with regard to our leadership. And I think that's true.
Well, The Shining comes to mind when I think of you, of the knight in shining armor who is just everywhere on his white steed. So, congratulations for all that you do, not only for Gloucester but for all of your constituencies. Let's get down to work here. Last time we talked, Senator, we were supposed to get together for something or other, and you ended up going back to North Andover with the governor. Can you give me a little update on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, we were very fortunate, Rick, that the governor and the lieutenant governor met up with the legislative delegation and local officials and affected business owners in North Andover to be able to look at the devastation that the flooding events that now happened a few weeks ago caused. And it was good to have them on the ground seeing it with us, because the magnitude of the damage is very, very significant. But something that hadn't been captured early on is the scope of the damage. And so we've been thinking about some of the businesses, particularly at the mill complex that we've all been visiting. But there are also folks that have been displaced from their homes. There are dams that have been compromised. And it's not just in North Andover, it's throughout the region in the Merrimack Valley. So it was good that we had the governor and the lieutenant governor there, because they are providing leadership as they need to be able to pull everyone together and have a regional effort. Because as I think we may have discussed, in order to get federal assistance, we have to meet a statewide target, a number that's a threshold, and also a countywide target. And so it's critically important that we continue to have good communication. And we still are in North Andover quite a bit, both me and my staff, on a regular basis to make sure that we can keep that communication flowing. And kudos to the town manager, Melissa Rodriguez in North Andover, who's also doing a great job of coordinating the effort. So right now, we know there's a lot of damage that's been acknowledged, but we're working with MEMA to try to properly classify that damage. So hopefully we can get federal reimbursement.
You know, my next question, considering the storm that's headed to Florida, considering our local flooding, considering that we're still in hurricane season, et cetera, how does the legislature work with MEMA or vice versa?
Well, the number one goal is to make sure that we maximize federal reimbursement, and the governor and I have spoken about that as well. So, Rick, we generally do not want to do anything legislatively in Massachusetts that might compromise our ability to get federal funding. We want the feds to take the lead. When that doesn't happen as much as it should, then the legislature can consider supplemental action, and I want to stress the word supplemental. And a good example of that, I'm sure you remember, and many of our viewers remember, that we had flooding in Vermont and central and western Massachusetts a couple of months ago that damaged a lot of the crops that our farmers were growing. And we, in a supplemental budget, appropriated $20 million to be able to help those farmers and also the farmers here in our region that have been impacted by a late frost that occurred, damaging a lot of fruit that was growing. And so the legislature's role is really to come in behind any federal effort, but we need to make sure that those lines don't get blurred. So right now, our focus is to maximize federal reimbursement. And then when we understand the nature of that and the size of that, then we will consider what we can do as state government.
I appreciate your explaining that. Thank you. All right, let's get down to money issues. What's going on with money?
Well, you know, we got to look over the last few days at what happened in fiscal year 2023. You know, and because we've discussed it, that we were concerned about a couple of bad revenue collection months. We now have an opportunity, thanks to information that's been released by the Department of Revenue, to look at what 2023 as a whole looked like, remembering that that fiscal year ended at the end of June. And what we now know is what we had suspected is we finished the year about $605 million below the benchmark on which the budget was based. And so we do have a shortfall. However, that shortfall really doesn't affect to any great extent spending in fiscal year 2023. It isn't like we don't have enough money to pay our bills. We do, because a lot of the shortfall was in capital gains taxes. And those taxes over a threshold get deposited into the stabilization fund. So what it means is we aren't going to be able to put as much in the stabilization fund as we had hoped. We're still going to make a contribution, but it does not impact spending to any great extent, either in fiscal year 2023 or fiscal year 2024, the year that we're now in. And Rick, the most recent indications from DOR is that we're still trending in a fairly positive way with regard to collections in this fiscal year. We certainly got an alarm that went off in April of this past spring, and we're watching it carefully, but right now we're holding our own.
Okay, so no panic.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
And hopefully never.
Right. Okay. I know. So let's go back to Gloucester. I know that from your house, which is not that far away from mine, I'm betting you can probably see Gloucester Harbor. And if not, you're very close to seeing it. And that brings us back to some big goings on this coming weekend.
Absolutely. If I step out into the front yard or go up onto the second floor of my house, Rick, I can get a bit of a view of the harbor. And it is going to be a spectacular sight over this coming weekend, because we have one of the busiest weekends of the year coming up in the Port of Gloucester, and that is the Schooner Festival. The Gloucester Daily Times is reporting today that we're going to have in excess of 20 schooners visiting the port to help us celebrate our 400th anniversary. And Rick, there are a few things that compare to the sight of those schooners under sail in Gloucester Harbor over this coming weekend. And it's interesting to think about, when you look at that vista, what Gloucester looked like every day in the 1800s when the tall sails were up, and you saw ships of all nature moving about the harbor and building part of that legacy that we celebrate in our 400th anniversary. And people, Rick, are going to get a chance not only to see those boats, but also a lot of them will offer tours when they're at the dock. And some of them will actually offer folks a chance to get on board and go out and be under sail. And I would encourage everyone to look into that opportunity if you are at all interested, because again, it is an experience that is unique. And I would encourage anybody that's interested in it to pursue it.
It's a spectacular view, and I miss Joe Garland's description down there on the waterfront, because I know that he used to narrate all those boats, and he knew more than anybody else, I think, on the planet about those boats.
He definitely did. But the good thing, number one, is Joe not only left a great legacy behind, but he left great literary works behind that we can read and still hear his voice and see his view of the way things are and the way things were. But the other thing that we're very fortunate for, Rick, is that we have Daisy Nell Collinson, who is the chair of the Schooner Festival Committee. And now she does that narration on the boulevard, and she is well versed as well. So the tradition continues. In fact, I would argue it's getting stronger, and there will be events throughout the weekend. And I would encourage folks to look into those and come to Gloucester and participate.
All right, one more question. My dad and I used to go lobstering back in the day. And we fished 300 traps, but we never went out on the weekend in the summertime. Have you been out there during the festival? Because I know you're a mariner.
You know, I am a mariner, and I have not had as many days off the dock this year as I would have liked. But I have been out. In fact, I was out on the water for the lobster trap race that the Gloucester Police Department sponsored. And Rick, there was a lot of boats in the harbor, so there's been a lot of marine activity. And I suspect that I may be out on the water again in this coming weekend to see the kind of sights that we just discussed.